Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I'm Joe. With me is Greg, as always, here to recap last week college basketball and preview this week's of college basketball. Greg, how are you doing?
You just, you want to address the elephant in the room, or
What elephant? What are we talking about? You talking about your Dayton
well,
Flyers? Your
it's
Dayton Flyers
yeah,
falling on their
no, yeah,
faces,
no, it's
or
it's more of a bulldog. If I oh well, I have a visual for everyone out there. So you see, last week I had a great week. I picked Georgia. Oh, how'd that get in there? And then I picked Georgia again. It was great. It was a great week for me. Just pay no attention to the R behind the curtain. All right.
yeah?
Okay. All right.
We all have good picks and bad picks of this business. Last week was a good pick for Greg with the Georgia picks, and we're gonna get to
And a
some.
bad and a stinker with the Rutgers. Listen,
We'll, we'll,
credit where credit is due, but blame where blame is due.
we'll mention maybe what you're going to do with Georgia this week too when we get to that point. But let's say Greg's not going to be invited down to Athens, Georgia, anytime soon after what he does to him this week. But good pick by him last week for Georgia and Greg. Not trying to take a shot at your Dayton Flyers, but A10 looking like a one bid league. I know that's got you down too. So we got a lot to talk about because honestly, a lot happened in the first week or two of conference play. Greg, let's just get it started on Tuesday. We're gonna start. You have some quick hitters outlined here that we're gonna talk about just for a couple seconds. I'll go down to all the whole list of them, and then we can go kind of get into our thoughts individually. But we have Arizona beating West Virginia 75-56. Arizona is turning things on. We talked about them, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago about being a team that was not winning a lot of their big games, but had no bad losses. We have Duke and Pittsburgh. Duke wins this one by a lot of points. It was one of their two really good performances this week. And then we have Georgetown and Marquette. Marquette beats Georgetown here. Georgetown is a much better team than they have been in the last couple years. So that's notable for that reason. And the last one we have Michigan and UCLA. And Michigan wins this one 94-75 in a pretty big blowout. And results in Mick Cronin just blasting his team pretty much after both games this week. I think he kind of had some bad comments after the game about how he's the toughest guy on the floor and how he almost has 500 wins while so that makes him superior to everyone that ever lived. So Greg, those were the four games we had quick hitters on. Grand scheme of things, may not have the biggest results in the end when we're talking about these teams, but it's always good to add to your resume. So what do you take away from any of those four games or all those four games?
Yeah. The Arizona West Virginia, we kind of mentioned last week. It was like West Virginia was ranked, but they were without Tucker DeVries, and we were like, "Am I going to walk away if Arizona wins this game? And am I like going to trust them?" And I was like, "No, probably not." And I mean, they go on and beat UCF this weekend, but it's like still up in the air with them. West Virginia, hopefully, they can be healthy, and they look like they might end up being better than we thought they could be. The Duke pick game. Cooper Fly gave us a little bit of a prelude to the weekend. He had a pretty nice dunk in that game, and that Duke defense absolutely smothered Pitt, holding them. I can't remember. It was 40 something. What was it? 40.
I think
You got the score in front of me.
47. Yep.
Unbelievable.
Mhm.
Although we did have another one of those results that we'll talk about in a different game. Um, Georgetown Marquette. Georgetown takes Marquette pretty much to the wire, and then honestly, outside of a 17-2 run for UConn, like played pretty well against UConn. So like it's one of those things where it just might be worth keeping an eye on them, because if the Big East is down, they might just be able to pile wins together. Like you might look up and they might be I don't know, a 14 and or 12-8, Big East team. Like, is that going to be good enough I don't know. We'll just worth monitoring. That Michigan team, man, like I feel like you had better thoughts on them than I did. I feel like I was just like, I don't know. I don't think this team is any good. I Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like you had I don't know if I want to say high hopes or high now. I felt like you were a little higher on them than kind of the media field was. I think regardless of what UCLA has done after, they look like they're pretty good. I guess the one sore spot is that Arkansas game that like got flipped on its head, right?
Mhm.
So Michigan team might be worth watching, and we're gonna get we'll get to see them in some good conference games coming up. Not gonna spend any tons of time on those games. It's just Tuesday was so loaded. I felt like we got to do our due diligence, at least touch on those games.
Absolutely. We gotta. I think I was higher after the first week of the season. I don't think preseason I was. I think they were very much like Illinois for me, where I saw them play and I'm like, oh, that is something to watch out for. Especially because they have my guy Danny Wolf. It's notable to put out there that Vlad Golden had 36 points in this game. That couldn't have made Mick Cronin happy as well. So I might go nuts if Vlad Golden had 36 on my team as well. Greg, maybe not your team when you coach, fourth graders. That, I mean, yeah, he could probably score 36 on them, but that's probably about it. All right, so other games that maybe are going to go more into a deep dive on for Tuesday. We have Florida beating Tennessee 73-43. And I think this is kind of two different ways to talk about this. Obviously, we'll start with Florida. They're the winners, Greg. They win by 30 in this one. We talked about how they have several good guards. And honestly, they only got 7 points out of Will Richard and Walter Clayton. So we had to have Elijah Martin step up, the FAU transfer, and they really showed their toughness on the glass in this one. They out-rebounded, I think they out-rebounded Tennessee 56-37. And that just shows that they kind of have that good complement of good rebounding bigs, but also guards who can kind of go get their own shots. So Florida kind of legitimized where they were ranked. Like, we saw them play against Kentucky, thought they were good, but like there was a lot of their games where they were supposed to have some big games, but the teams they played ended up not being as good as we thought. And now it kind of really legitimizes what they're doing, winning by 30. For Tennessee to go to the losers now, there were some weird things that happened with Tennessee this week. We have Chaz Lanier getting benched, and Rick Barnes saying, if you're not going to do what you're paid to do, you're going to sit on the bench, and which is to shoot. We have this obviously blowout loss, and I think it's fair to ask the question: does it matter if you get blown out anymore, Greg? Because last year we kind of had this conversation with Kentucky getting blown out in one of their games. They obviously ended up losing in the first round, but I think more and more teams are getting blown out. I don't know if it's 3-point line. I don't know what it is, but also, like, it matters more to get blown out than it ever has because of the efficiency metrics playing into the NCAA tournament. So you might want to say, hey, like, it's one game, throw it out, and that might be true for Tennessee, who only has one loss. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty at the end of the year, if Tennessee drops a couple more in SEC play, it matters that they lost by 30. The efficiency numbers are going to show that out. So a lot to unpack here with the game that maybe was the most anticipated during the week. Greg, where are you going with it first?
I took a lot of notes on this game, but I could have just taken a page and just said Florida is good, and that probably would have been enough. Holding Tennessee to 43 points is an accomplishment. I mean, they've done well on the offensive side. They did drop a little bit in terms of offensive efficiency. They dropped to 26, but the thing with me for Florida is they're getting close to that range where they could be top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency in terms of KenPom, sitting at 14th in defense. And I think, this game, I don't know what it was before, but I'm assuming this game probably did a ton for them in that factor. And Joe, you already mentioned it. I just want to reiterate it. It's like barely anything from Will Richard, barely anything from Walter Clayton, and we've still got a 73-43 result. Like, this team, yeah, they had a light schedule, and like, I liked looking up and down that Carolina roster I'll keep, again, I'm going to celebrate my wins, but we're not but 2 weeks from me picking Carolina to beat Florida because, again, I just said, like, they haven't played anybody. Like, I think at the time I said, like, their non-conference strength of schedule was like 260 or something. Well, they're getting matchups in SEC play, and honestly, it's like, it doesn't even matter that they're playing SEC teams now, right? They're still having tremendous success. The only thing I worry about with this team is, like, yeah, it's cool that, like, you have several options, but I'd like to see some consistency. You know what I mean? But like, if they got this three-headed monster of Clayton, Richard, and Elijah Martin, and it's one of them and like Denzel Aberdeen's had a couple of good games too, where he's provided some bench scoring. So I like, again, this is nitpicking of nitpicking because this is honestly, it's a top 5 team in the country right now. But like, I feel like I'd like to see a little bit more consistency from your stars. But again, we're talking about that when I'm talking about, do I want to trust this team as a national title contender? Not when I'm talking about, is this team a top 10 team or not, right?
Definitely. This is a. I think they have it figured out. It just didn't play out this way too, because I do think Walter Clayton is that guy, and then Elijah Martin's the kind of the secondary option, and Will Richard is kind of the shooter that opens things up at different times. It did not go that way in this game, but it's also playing a Tennessee team that's good at defense. But also have to credit Florida's defense in this one too. Zakai Ziegler, 4 of 12 from the floor. Chaz Lanier, 3 of 16 from the floor, and Jordan Gainey, 1 of 11 from the floor. So that is not just guards who are very good offensive stars, but ones who are putting in work on both ends of the floor there. So good for Florida to get that win. And Greg, just to finish up the point about whether it matters to get blown out, I don't think it matters that much. And to be honest, I think we could still say Tennessee is a good team. I think we can still say Tennessee can win the national championship. I will not be picking them to do so, but like that, I think you could still say they're in that pool of teams. That's just not something I think is the same way that it has been in the last several years, where teams get blown out and you're kind of like, is this team good anymore? It's just that's how it goes in this day's college basketball.
I mean, the only other thing you got to mention with this team is like, what on earth is going to go on with this Todd Golden stuff, man? Like, it was like we talked about it for like 48 hours, and then your good old news cycle just like kind of spits it back out and says we're not worried about it. But like, I mean, again, situation aside, it sounds horrible, but like, can you just imagine the horror of Florida fans if like in February all of a sudden like Golden's suspended for the rest of the year or something like that thing is not, it didn't just like go away. So it's still there. I'm sure it's pending, litigation or whatever. I don't know how this, it's sure it's in civil court or whatever, but like that's just, they seem to be playing fine despite it, but like that there's, don't just like completely write that off as something that might come into play this season, because like I feel like that could have huge implications on a top team in the country, a top conference in the country. Like whole landscape of college basketball could change if all of a sudden and it felt like this news broke out of nowhere when it first started. So who's to say it won't we won't get a sudden update out of nowhere again?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We haven't heard anything about it. There hasn't been anything published that I just Googled since like November 15th when this all came out, basically that week. So that's something that could derail the season. Hopefully, whatever happens, justice is served, and we'll figure that part out. But in terms of Florida, the only thing we can do right now is evaluate how they're playing and what they can do in the future, and that looks pretty good for now. So we will stick with that until we have more information, and we'll make sure to kind of follow up when that comes out, because you're right, it definitely could come out almost at any point, I feel like. So next game up, Greg, we have Cincinnati and Baylor. Baylor wins this one. This was not a ranked matchup, but we picked it because we kind of felt like the two teams needed to kind of have games go their way, we'll say, as they were going into Big 12 play. So to kind of recap this game, I think this showed me a lot about Baylor, and I will kind of, I'll say I did a bracketology today on the Game House. Baylor's like a 7 seed. Cincinnati, not in the field for me. So I think it very much kind of showed the paths of these two teams, where Baylor might be figuring things out. They're 2-1 in the Big 12 after this game. Cincinnati dropped to 0-3. Baylor won the 68-48. And in this game, Greg, we found out Cincinnati's offense is on a vacation somewhere, and it's not good because they scored 48 against Baylor. We're going to get to their other game against Kansas where it was worse.
Yeah, and that's why one of the reasons I included this game. I believe we both picked Baylor, and it was just like it was more that narrative of we're coming off, a couple of, decent wins for UC where they win the crosstown shootout, and then they win the game at Heritage Bank Arena against Dayton, and like I had mixed feelings where like I left that game saying, I don't feel like the defense is that good. I definitely felt like their offense left to be desired. Twitter didn't like that, and I let myself get talked into certain things, but now it's like they just put up 88 points in 2 games. Like, I mean, that's not the greatest, like we got a lot of teams out. Like I'm watching games this weekend. We got teams putting up 88 points in less than 2 halves. So, and especially it's a Baylor team that we've said like, again, like, maybe the defense is a little better than it was, but like defense has not been their strong suit, and you put up 48. Like that's not a singing recommendation of your offense. I think we kind of knew that's where UC would struggle if it was anywhere, but I don't think I even realized it was going to be this bad. I don't know if I have like a fix for them or whatever. I did, watch some of this game. I mean, like the only things that like stuck out to me was like, man, Norchad Omier is just like so shifty and so fun to watch. And like, forget the fact that dude's undersized. Like, he's 18 and 10 in this game. He had an impact, on both ends of the floor. In terms of Baylor and where they can go, I mean, like, I don't know. What do you think their ceiling is? So you said you got them around a 7 seed. You think in your bracketology? I mean, like, I feel like if they pick it up, I want to look situationally. I'm just gonna pull up their schedule here real quick. I mean, like the best games they have remaining are like Kansas, at Texas Tech, Houston. Like there's some room, but like I feel like they don't have, and we talked about this with Big 12, like they don't have like a giant abounding, multitude of opportunities. Like they'll have some opportunities, but it's probably going to come down to they're going to have to win the games they're supposed to win, and they're going to have to pick off one of these teams that they're not supposed to beat either home or on the road. But like I still feel like even then you're looking at like at best like a 5 seed, unless they really just start annihilating teams. What do you think?
Yeah,
but a dangerous 5 seed at that, I'll say.
I don't even know about that. That's what I think I'm coming down to. Is like I really like Norchad Omier. Talked about that last year about how for Miami I thought he just was such a good player, and I think I had him as an All-American in preseason All-Americans last year. But he is undersized. I don't like their size. Robert Wright I really think is one of their better players at guard. But if this team's going to get to where they need to be, they need a VJ Edgecombe to take that step. And he's scoring 12.4 points a game. Not by bad freshman season by any stretch of the matter, but this is a guy who, in a class that has Cooper Flagg, was kind of, in that tier, not the same tier as Cooper Flagg, like up next to him. He needs to be amazing, and he's just not yet, and that's fine. But I would say, as things are currently constructed, I would say this is a team I'm picking to lose in the first weekend. If he turns out to be good, I think they can go on a run and maybe make Sweet 16. But that still remains to be seen because there's still a lot of holes in this team, whether it's the size or the defense you can point to. They can go on that run, but I'm still a little concerned about them as a team overall. And the only way they're going to figure this out is by him developing. And if somehow it's not him developing, then other people have to really show they can do more than they have so far this season. So a lot of time for them to prove it in Big 12 play. Even if Big 12 isn't as good as maybe the past years, it's still going to be a gauntlet for them going through it. So excited to see what they can do. Next one up, Greg, we have your first one that you were right. Georgia beating Kentucky 82-69. Kentucky live by the 3, die by the 3. 24% from 3 in this one. That is the story of the game for Kentucky. Could not get any shots to go down. And conversely, you have Georgia 29.2% from 3, but they're not built the same way. They don't play the same way. That's why they win. 82 points from them. And you get Asa Newell, a guy who I think a lot of people continue to learn about as the season goes on, a very good player for Georgia, 17 points. And I think it kind of just shows two different styles of play and how they get things done. So good for Georgia to get the win. A lot of people saying they capitalized on getting free throws, but, at a certain extent, yeah, the referees were pretty bad in this game. Biased Kentucky fan here, but they were pretty bad. They still got the opportunities to go to the line. They still got the chances to do it. They were aggressive enough to get there. So a team that really put themselves on the map this week, Greg.
They did put themselves on the map, but it was one of those weird things where, like, I'm watching this game and, like, what's echoing in my head is I can't remember the wording you used last week, but you were something like Greg might turn out to be right, but like not necessarily. We have a friend that we make fun of, and we say he's the king of saying stuff, and it turns out to be right, even though he didn't really know what he was talking about. I was watching this game and I was like, first of all, Asa Newell was so quiet in the first half, like super quiet. I think he had like a 3 late in the first half that gave. That extended that lead a little bit, but he had a much better second half. But like, I don't know if it was that I thought they were playing bad or it was just this like choppy style that just kind of the game lacked some flow. But like I wasn't watching it. I was sitting there saying, man, you know, like as time winds down, like I might turn out to be right, but like I'm not super wowed. I still like I wouldn't have if you'd have texted me and said, Greg, you have an opportunity after this win to change your Oklahoma pick. You know, I still no, I'm sticking with Georgia, but like I'm not picking them next week. Like they could, you know, if I'm wrong and they beat either you know Auburn or who else is on their schedule next week? It's another top 10 team. They got two really good games next. I can't remember if they were. I think we're picking both of them. But if they beat either of those two teams next week, like I'll happily be wrong. But I just like I this is a good win for them. Like don't get me wrong. I'm not saying any of that, but like I did not sit here and say this team just catapulted to me into like top 10 status. Like yes, they're ranked and they should be. They have you know the body of work that they should be now. But like for them to be, you know, an elite of elite team, they've got some growing to do.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I don't know how else to say this because I do think this is kind of how it goes in most times when you have one team that is better that loses the game. I think we both agree Kentucky is the better team. The This is more about what Kentucky did than what Georgia did. It was Kentucky missing threes. It was about Kentucky's breakdowns on defense. It was about Kentucky fouling. And Georgia credited them for taking advantage, but this is like, to me, it wasn't an impressive win because it was more me realizing what Kentucky didn't do in the situation to win. And again, a lot of that is making threes, and that's how they play, but that was kind of how I took it. They didn't overly impress me. I think they can win a lot of games in the SEC, but if you're looking for a team that you're like really excited about, maybe not Georgia, but a team that you don't want to play nonetheless. All right, so let's go to the next game we have. That'll be on Wednesday. We have Texas A&M and Oklahoma, Greg. Now, we did not know this going in to the week, but Wade Taylor did not play in this game. Didn't matter. We have some really good basketball being played by Phelps for Texas A&M. He had 34 points in this one. They win this one 80-78. And I think the thing that impressed me was that they didn't have too much help for Phelps at all, which kind of feels like some of those old Wade Taylor teams. Like if Tyrese Radford was off last year, it would be all Wade Taylor. But it was all Phelps. Like they had 3 double-digit scorers. They get the job done. For Oklahoma, too, their big stars didn't have great games. Jalen Moore had 11 points. Jeremiah Fears had 13. So it was a game that was really fun to watch, but not exactly like doesn't really tell us what Texas A&M is going to be. It just tells you what it's going to be without Wade Taylor, which is still a very good team, apparently.
Yeah, I almost wonder if like this could be one of those not necessarily addition by subtraction, but like maybe this absence that they're going through with Wade Taylor kind of teaches them how to play without him. Now Zurch Phelps has had, I mean, he's been their number 2 dude.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying like, oh, this is him. Like he was already their number 2 dude, but sometimes like your identity changes when your A1 guy is out for a little while, and you know, winning a game like this on the road in the SEC, you know, Oklahoma team maybe is not, you know, maybe a little bit inflated, you know, whatever. Maybe didn't think they were, you know, as good as the number next to their name or whatever. It's fine. It's still a road win in the SEC, but you know, I think when you look at this from like, I don't know, like if you want to say it's like a strategic or like a narrative type thing, like learning how to play, not just depending on, you know, your one dude, you know, could be helpful. I mean, like you think about like in the past, like just like last year, it was Taylor and Tyrese Radford, and they don't have him anymore. Like, but there was still like a sense of we know who our first option is, and we know who our second option is. Now, Joe, you and I have been playing this mystery of where, you know, in the world is Henry Coleman, and like what, you know, some of the other pieces, like where do they fit, and maybe some of this time where Wade Taylor steps away, you know, because of injury, maybe those pieces settle into place, and then all of a sudden you look up and Texas A&M has gone on a huge run, you know, and won a bunch of games and really figured out a team identity. I still think like there was never any question. You know, we've talked about this with a couple of teams, like situationally, like who's your guy? It's still going to be Wade Taylor, but like when you're talking about a larger sample size and like how a team plays across a stretch of like 10 games, you know, like this kind of thing could be helpful. I'm not saying it will or it won't be, but this is definitely a win like this is definitely it's a plus.
Yeah, definitely get the win without one of your guys. I think if you have guys like Phelps and Taylor together, it's going to help your efficiency too. Because to be honest, there are times where Wade Taylor is not very efficient, and that's what I think frustrates some of us. So there'll be some games where he's 4 for 17, I think, last year. And Phelps wasn't efficient in this game either. They're 11-25. But if you have them both on the court, you can kind of go with the hot hand. You can kind of get the open shot. And that is something that I think helps him in the future. And I will say, I do think Buzz Williams needs to be studied. I don't know how he keeps these players coming back to this program in the transfer portal era. Henry Coleman, 14 minutes. Manny Obaseki, one of your lead guards is out. Manny Obaseki was the top guard off the bench last year. He started this game, played 16 minutes. Like, make it make sense. I mean, they have a deep team. They're going to be fine when they get to March if they get foul trouble of any kind. They have Anderson Garcia coming off the bench, Pharrell Payne, Jace Carter. I don't know how he does it. Like, I would have, if I were a player on those teams, I consider myself a decently loyal guy. I'd be saying, like, why am I still playing here? Why am I not going somewhere where I could play, man? So, good for him. A lot of it probably NIL money. Texas A&M has a lot of money, a lot of faithful supporters, but that to me is the most alarming. Every time I watch Texas A&M, you think a man down, so like some of these other guys are going to have to step up and play more minutes. They don't. It's just fun. So, watch out for that, and watch their depth moving forward. That's definitely going to help them. Next game up, Greg. Go ahead.
There's one other very important topic we've not brought up.
Oh, go ahead.
Thoughts on Buzz Williams with hair? What is yes, no, keep it, go back to what? Just got to hear your opinion.
Go back.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
It kind of creeps me out a little bit.
He looks like suburban soccer dad right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. You watch the broadcast and it's like, I don't know about that one. Sometimes you just got to let it go. All right, so let's go to Villanova beating UConn, Greg. Now, this is a UConn team without Liam McNeely, who I think, like, Dan Hurley is making this Liam McNeely's team. And there are other players on this team. There are other leaders on this team who've been through it before, but he is the guy. So it is very much not a full-strength UConn team, but Villanova deserves credit because they have played well. I think even since that Cincinnati win they had a month ago, they have played very well in a game that we didn't think that they maybe had a shot in. They have 2 losses since that point, and they get the win 68-66. Eric Dixon, 23 points in this one, putting his name in the mix for the National Player of the Year. I think there's someone else who's probably stepped up even more so, but Eric Dixon leading the country in scoring at Villanova, where everyone knows he's getting the ball, and let's be honest, there aren't many other threats on this team that you're very worried about. There's a couple other ones for sure, but not as much as other teams have, and he just continually puts up big games for them. He might will Kyle Neptune off of the hot seat. He might will Villanova to the tournament. They're very much on the bubble now. Very big turnaround by Villanova, and I think it's signified in this one, even if UConn is not at full strength.
Yeah, he really. I don't know if I'm ready to say like, hey, situation normal. We've moved to DEFCON. What I can never remember which one's good, which one's bad. We've moved off of high alert. But he's definitely making progress. Like, I thought, honestly, that like a couple weeks ago, I thought, honestly, there was a chance he might get fired mid-season. And again, I say that saying, like, I'm not ready to completely say the matter is put to bed because, like, they could mess around and all of a sudden they lose 6 straight and then we're back where we were. But, like, that being said, I don't think this team is going to hit us, especially in, again, a little bit of a weaker Big East. I don't think this team is – now, here's the thing. It's like I've said this about Georgetown. I've said this about St. John's, and now I'm saying about Villanova. Like, I feel like do you think it would be better for the Big East if, like, one of those teams stepped up and, like, won all those games? Or do you think it would be better for the Big East if, like, St. John's, Georgetown, and Villanova all end up in the same pot, all end up bubble team? Because I think you would agree if one of those teams kind of wins all of those games, they would be surefire tournament team. I don't know if the situation would be better if you say, hey, maybe those 3 teams kind of split those games amongst each other and obviously win their other games, drop a game here or there, because then you could, like, you're gambling, but you could, like, find a way back to, like, a 5-bid Big East, like I don't know what makes the most sense. Like if you're a Big East apologist or like whatever, I don't
Yeah.
like if you're asking me, like I think the best thing is probably going to be St. John's just win their games and be what they were supposed to be. But Villanova and Georgetown being better than they were supposed to be kind of helps their case, because who knows what's going on with Creighton after Popeye. I mean, like they're going to have a lot of soul searching to do after Popeyes. We can talk about that later, but we went to that game this weekend. But I don't know. I have thoughts on. I don't know that there's necessarily a right answer. Like obviously the best thing would be for them to get 5 teams in, but like I don't know if that's feasible. Even with these teams, maybe the funny thing is like these teams are maybe playing a little bit better than they were supposed to be from the context of a down Big East.
Yeah, I only had 3 teams in the bracketology in the field from the Big East. It was Marquette, St. John's, and UConn. Villanova on the outside looking in, Georgetown still on the outside looking in, Creighton on the outside looking in, and go on down. So I think. Go ahead.
Do you remember we did this exercise at some point in November where we went through the 11 Big East teams and I said in or out, and obviously it was then at the time. I want to say we got to 5 yeses. It was 5. It was definitely 5. I can't remember if we got to 6, but like, I mean, like right now, I feel like it's like you're probably safer if I gave you $100 and I said bet 3 bids or 5 bids for the Big East, you're gonna put that money on 3 bids, right?
Yeah, and that's
you can have either 3 or 5. You can put it on 3 right now,
and that's why I think it's probably best that one of these teams just steps up and wins it. I think St. John's was a 9 seed. They were the 3rd team out of the bunch to be in. I think you're better off if Villanova goes on a run, or Georgetown goes on a run, or Creighton goes on a run and kind of starts winning most of their games to make sure you get 4 bids, because the worst thing that could happen is the same thing that happened last year, which is, well, other than UConn winning the whole thing, is only getting in a couple teams because other teams just kind of falter down the stretch, or some other teams like Seton Hall maybe got screwed. So I think you want to shoot for 4 at this point. I mean, obviously, if you're a Big East commissioner right now, you're hoping everyone wins their games and kind of like beats up on the teams below the bubble. But I don't know if that's feasible. I think you're realistically hoping that 4 get in, and you're at that point you have to hope they make some noise, because we'll talk about it probably later in March. But like Marquette looks like they have a chance to kind of do something in the tournament. UConn maybe not as much. We'll see how Lee McNeely gets back and how he does. And then St. John's, I don't know. They could maybe win a game. I don't know. So that's going to be a lot to track in these next couple weeks. Villanova did go and lose on the road to St. John's too. St. John's was like firmly in the tournament, so I'm not going to judge them based on that. Still think they have a lot of room to grow as we talk about this team, and they are very fun to watch. If you're ever trying to watch college basketball and picking out what teams to watch, Eric Dixon makes this team like one of the teams that, even if it's not having a number by their name where they're ranked, they're fun to watch because that guy can just light it up.
Yeah, I think we might get to a point with some of these teams we're talking about where I might throw them on our pick sheet, and it's going to be an unranked team versus an unranked team. But like, just depending on how it might shape what the Big East tournament picture looks like in terms of how many if we get to late February and like there's a Villanova Georgetown game, I don't have either schedule in front of me, but like that one that has that holds a lot of water, that holds a lot of weight, that again, if it just matters for that kind of thing, for one of them to get off the bubble or whatever, it's weird because when I'm going through these picks, it's like all these games that definitely 2 and 3 years ago would have been like surefire, like, yep, we're picking that game. And like, it's sad because, both Joe and I are Big East alums, but I mean, it's even the Big 12 is down a little bit. So hopefully we're just going through a little rut and get back up that hill.
We'll see. NIL have a lot to say about some of those teams getting back up, so we'll see. Let's move on to Saturday, Greg. We have a couple quick hitters. You have 2 on there. I'm going to add another one, too. USC beats Illinois. They don't have Kasparas, so that doesn't, that's not a huge thing to worry about. They said he warmed up, but they don't know whether he's going to play this week. They want to wait till he's 100%, but he did warm up, so that's a good sign. But USC wins 82-72. Desmond Claude, former Xavier player, big day with 31 points. Cooper Flagg has a huge day, set the ACC scoring record with ACC freshman scoring record with 42 points. Also had 6 rebounds, 7 assists. As Duke beats Notre Dame, Notre Dame tried to kind of like get a late comeback, ended up falling just short. And then the last one I have to add here, Mountain West basketball, Greg. Utah State beats Boise State 81-79. Ian Martinez hits a 3 and gets fouled late in the game to make the game winner. Very good game, high level basketball from both teams, and both teams still have a chance to make the tournament as at-large bids. Utah State currently the front runner in the Mountain West to kind of win the conference, so they get the auto bid. But Boise State's still much in the running. They do have a quad 4 loss though, so that's not going to be good for them. All right, so that's the quick hitters. Greg, any quick thoughts on those?
All right, Johni Broom's health is like paramount to how this season goes. Like I mentioned the Todd Golden thing, like Johni Broom's health, and it sounds like he avoided, as far as we know, he avoided anything serious. I would expect, if anything, them to be abundantly, because like at this point, the selection committee knows like if they lose 2 games with him out, like they're not dumb. They know he didn't play. Even though, and I mean, that's the only thing I would say is like they were struggling in that game before he went out and like pulled it out, but you know, that's beside the point. But I would imagine they'll really go slow bringing him back, because I already heard someone bring it up, like that's his 2nd injury that he's dealing with. You know, and it's like weird, odd things, like his shoulder getting caught in someone going for a rebound, and his ankle. Like it's not like an overused thing. It's not like a pitcher throwing too many innings. Like it's just, I mean, these things just happen, and like it sucks that it's happened to him twice now. Probably, you know, hurts his numbers when you start looking at National Player of the Year, but I think they'd rather be a Final Four and title contender than that. You know, I feel like if you asked him the same thing, like, would you rather have a national championship or National Player of the Year? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but like I feel like he'd say I'd rather have a national title, because I don't know. I just feel like that's what guys care about more. But maybe you have a different opinion.
No, I think everyone would say national championship, but you know, there's probably part of him that thinks maybe National Player of the Year is probably more in his control than everything else. So, yeah, he's going to be out for probably a couple of weeks. It looks like sprained ankle. So, suffered against South Carolina. Auburn did go on to win that game 66-63 in a game they were down early. So they do have enough talent to kind of maybe keep things steady, maybe lose a game here or there. Remember, they aren't going to go, you know, undefeated in SEC play anymore. I don't even know if that was on the table if he was there. Probably not. But, you know, they definitely have a lot of work to do without him moving forward for the next couple weeks. Greg, the first game we have to talk about is Kansas and Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati was actually, I believe, favored at one point in this game. Yeah, the Kansas moved to like a slight favorite by the time the game kicked off. Starts off, there was, I think, 12 fouls in the entire game, which makes it a very unique game in and of itself. I don't know if that's because the teams weren't fouling. I did not get a chance to watch this one. But the bigger thing here is Kansas kind of like gets things figured out. They score some points second half. Cincinnati does not, and they end up scoring 40 points. So we kind of alluded to this earlier. That offense kind of struggles, and we got some major problems in Cincinnati because they're 0-4 in Big 12 play. Kansas, we kind of already talked about them enough this year. Like we know they're going to be solid. We don't how good they're going to be. We can have debates about, but that really puts Wes Miller. I think I wasn't on the hot seat before, but this puts a little bit of a precedent or pressure on him to get some wins.
Yeah, I mean, I literally scoffed when you had mentioned that to me. The only thing I'll say is, like, I feel like we kind of saw this coming. Like, both of us picked Baylor and then Kansas. Like, ideally, you would have liked them to get the Baylor game because that was probably the more likely game that they were going to get. But 0-4 in the Big 12 puts them, I mean, squarely behind the 8 ball, because we've already talked about, like, yeah, in the past, this has been bar none the best conference in college basketball. It's definitely not this year by any means. And I don't know that they're going to have, again, we've talked about this before, they don't have like a mountain of, you know, huge opportunities. I mean, like the 2 best games remaining on their schedule Iowa State, that's away. I would not in any world, unless half the Iowa State's team's injured, I would not pick them to win that. I would not pick UC to win that game. They play at Houston. I would not pick UC to win that game. I mean, they do get a return Baylor game. Maybe it looks different at home. I don't know. Like looking at the rest of their schedule, man. Like I don't know if I count them to lose the games that I think they're going to lose. I just feel like even if they win realistically, if they win the other 10 games on their Big 12 schedule, even if they don't have any good Big 12 wins, they'll probably make the tournament. But like, I still think it would be close. Like, I think they're gonna have to get one of these marquee wins and win a lot of the other games that they're supposed to win. And I just don't know that I see, like, this is the thing is like, who's mad is like Dayton fans, because it's like, man, you tell me we lost to this team, like they suck right now, like,
okay, Greg, we don't make the UC troubles about yourself. All right, there you go. Let's put it this way. At Colorado this week, must-win game, because you can't drop any. There's no more margin for error. And then you kind of get into their schedule. It kind of makes they don't play another ranked team until the Iowa State game. That's February 15th.
Yeah, but they have the Texas Tech game coming up at home. Like, I think you and I would agree that's a quality win. Like, if they were able to, but like, I don't think that's a game that they can win. I don't. No. Playing right now.
But what I'm going to say is that, like, these games are, like, way more important now because you have 4 losses, and then you get tougher games at the back end of the schedule where, yes, I agree, Texas Tech is playing well and a solid team. They're not playing at Iowa State. They're not playing at Houston. So this next 4-5 weeks, this is, like, very crucial. They can only take maybe 1 or 2 losses before, if you're going to feel good about going into the back half of the schedule, where you, again, if you want to chalk it up, at least 3 or 4 losses starting February 15th on. So, team that did not play a tough non-conference schedule might be paying for it. We'll see how it goes. And I still think Wes Miller's a good coach. I think they're running into the buzzsaw that is the Big 12. They desperately, if you look back on this and say, hey, they beat Kansas State. They found out a way to beat Kansas State, and they lost to Baylor, and then they lost to Arizona, who we're finding out more and more is maybe a better team than we thought earlier in the season. They lost to Baylor, they lost to Kansas. Then you're thinking, okay, I mean, that makes sense. They're 1-3, and like it was one bad loss off the resume. So there's, like, I don't know. I still believe Wes Miller can get this thing fixed, but it has to happen now. This game against Colorado must win on this week. So that's, if you're looking for maybe some bubble watch games already this, early in the season, which is not very common, that's one that they have to win.
I just looked so defense still good, right? 7th in KenPom. You want to just hazard guess what the offensive efficiency is ranked right now?
Oh gosh, 75th.
119, brother.
Oh boy,
that's not a tournament. Oh my goodness, that's bad. I feel like if anything, we usually see the opposite, like a really good offensive team, that just, like, the offense is so good the defense doesn't matter. But, like, man, those kind of numbers do not look like a tournament team right now. I'm not saying they can't turn it around. Like, there's definitely some good quality players on that team. I think they do. I mean, they do play tough, hard-nosed defense. The offense may just not be there for them to be a tournament team.
Well, is Mick Cronin coaching this team? What's going on here? This is crazy. So Wes Miller, I think, actually has a decently good offensive mind. I don't know. He's been switching things up. CJ Frederick played in this game, and, like, he's former Iowa and Kentucky player. He hasn't played as much at all this season. They're trying everything. They're throwing the kitchen sink at.
Hey, I got a wild scenario for you that's not that wild considering all the coaches that are returning to the old schools.
Yeah.
Mick seems like he's had it in California. I mean, like, it sounds like he's dealing with, the fires and everything is, somewhat near his home, but, like, who says no? Like, if UC is dumb enough to fire Wes Miller, I don't know who says no in that situation.
Are you saying the same thing if they lose to Colorado this week? That 1-5, they lost to Colorado. Oh gosh. We'll save that for happen.
Yeah.
I like Wes Miller too. I thought he was a good coach. I still think he's a good coach, and maybe just not the best situation. I think they have more talent than what they're showing. We'll see if they figure it out. But again, there's this is like the point. I know I mentioned it like last week, where like yes, there's still a national championship game in football, which good for college football. Getting two biggest brands in college football going up against each other, that's awesome. We need maybe one of those in college basketball where we get like a Kentucky Duke national championship or something like that. That'd be really fun. But this is when it turns over where like things get more serious for college basketball and fans start tuning in. So a lot to be figured out here. And Greg, one of the things I figured out when I was doing my bracketology, there is like the top of the sport. Like I'm not gonna say there's like a dominant team that we've seen in past years like Kentucky 2012 or anything like that. There is a lot of good teams at the top. First couple seeds, Tennessee, Auburn, Duke. There's a lot of good teams through like seeds 7 or 8 that like teams I could see maybe going on a little bit of run. There's still a lot of wiggle room for the bubble. There's a lot of teams that are like in the tournament right now that have 0 quad 1 wins. So there's a lot to be decided. I know this is kind of like a little bit of a tangent here, but you see a couple good wins, they can be in because there are teams that are in the field right now on my bracketology, other bracketologists' bracketology that have 0 quad 1 wins. So still a lot of hope out there for a lot of teams. Not over by any means. All right, Greg, let's go to Alabama, Texas A&M. Texas A&M, again, without Wade Taylor. They put up a good fight. So, again, good showing from Texas A&M this week. They have Pharrell Payne scoring 23 points off the bench in this one. He was a very big performer for them going with Phelps, as we talked about him having a good game earlier. Alabama, though, I think is really starting to figure this team out. Yes, they lost with Trell Wrightsell out for the season, but they have so much depth, and Chris Youngblood's playing more. He was injured earlier this year. He's getting more into the swing of things, and you have Mark Sears score 27. No other starter had double digits, but they're so deep that 3 players off the bench score in double digits. This is a team that I think we kind of had our reservations about them at different points during the non-conference schedule, but really settling into what we think their potential was at the beginning of the season, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about with them is they and again, it's analytics based, but they do love to chuck the threes, man. And sometimes you worry with teams that are so reliant on it. And it's not like they don't have guys that can go get a bucket in the paint. And they very much subscribe to it's either a 3 or it is a bucket right next to the basket. Those are the places we shoot. We hardly ever take mid-range shots. I was watching the game the other day, and I was thinking, I almost wonder if they're, again, this will be a little bit of a tangent. I just wonder if defense will change to the point where those mid-range shots are going to be wide open, and are you going to start saying, well, I'd rather take the wide open mid-range shot than go for the contested layup? I don't know. That's a high level basketball thought. As we get into more analytics, we'll see. But Mark Sears firmly puts himself back. I mean, we said this last week already, but back in the National Player of the Year conversation, he already was. Johni Broome's injury, kind of helps him continue being in that discussion. Cooper Flagg might maybe give himself a little leg up. I don't know that that's kind of the one thing I wanted to talk about, because we can say the same thing about Texas A&M. We already said, hey man, you guys played well without Wade Taylor. We love to see that. It stinks that he's out, but taking Alabama to the wire, even if it's at home, that's a win in my book. No, it's not a win in the selection committee's book, but it's a win in my book. Do you I mean, and this can be 2 different answers, but do you have a feel on who's the National Player of the Year if the season ended today, and who do you think it will be when the season ends? Because it does seem like Cooper Flagg's stock is rising, right? And the Broome injury doesn't help him. Who knows how much time he's going to miss?
Let me put it this way. I think Broome is the Player of the Year right now. I think, and that's my opinion, I think that people would vote for Cooper Flagg because more people know who Cooper Flagg is. Even some of the people who vote on this know Cooper Flagg more so than they know Johni Broome or have watched him play, just because he's at Duke, and Johni Broome has taken an unorthodox path to get to where he is. I think it's going to end up being Cooper Flagg. We have Johni Broome out for a little bit, and Cooper Flagg is starting to ascend. We're starting to see him I think we mentioned this earlier in the season, Greg. Like, be like the Anthony Davis. Like, some games he'll score 40, some games he might score 12, but either way, he's gonna have a huge impact on his team winning. So, my feeling is he's gonna win. I think he would win if it ended today, but I do think Johni Broome should win if it ended today. And to be honest, Greg, isn't it? It's kind of weird for me. I mean, remind me if I'm forgetting someone, but like, if we're even talking first team All-American, so basically the guys who are up for the award, it's pretty cut and dry for me right now who they would be. It'd be Mark Sears, it'd be Cam Jones, Cooper Flagg, Johni Broome, and Eric Dixon. And I don't know if there's someone I'm missing that should really be on that list right now.
I mean, like, if you asked me, like, weeks ago, like, we were coming off the Ryan Kalkbrenner, like, huge game, but, like, they've faded. Obviously, that's some of that. But, like, I mean, if it's right now, there's guys that could get. We just talked about, like, Walter Clayton. Like, there's guys that could get there.
Yeah.
But, like, I think if you're talking about, you know, like, Chaz Lanier can get there, but, like, you're talking about the way the things are right now, I don't think just to clarify, are you saying, like, I don't think there's any way that you know that changes? Or are you saying, like, that's how I feel about it, right? I just want to make sure I'm understanding what
what I'm saying is, like, I think that would be like more of a general. It could definitely change. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that would be like almost like a general consensus. I think everyone would have about those five. I don't think there'd be too many people changing up those five that I gave, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you just, like, look up and down the list of the other, you know, top 10, 15-ish teams, I mean, Iowa State really attacks the game as a team. Again, this is mentioning guys that we didn't already mention. We mentioned Florida. I mentioned Chaz Lanier from Tennessee, who, again, could get there. I mean, Houston, I don't know that they have, like, a you know, again, more of a team. Texas A&M, Wade Taylor's not efficient enough to probably end up on that list. I mean, like, you know, then you get to, like, yeah, you got maybe Graham Ike and, like, maybe, like, Braden Smith, but, like, again, I think those are guys that, like, if their teams went on runs, like, could get there. But, like, if you were to tell me write a list today, I think you're right. I think it's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep tabs on it. It can change. And you mentioned Iowa State. Their best players coming off the bench right now, Curtis Jones. They had a tough one at Texas Tech. They came away with the win, though. And the other name you mentioned, that just a quick note before we move on to another game, Braden Smith, another big week for assists. He had a lot of assists this week. He is on pace to set the NCAA career record for assists. If he plays all out this year and all next year and keeps at his current average, he will have the assist record. So, props to him. I mean, he's doing it this year even without Zach Edey, so that is very impressive for him.
I'm not too big on NBA stuff. Like, I do watch, you know, come finals time, but, like, is he popping on any boards, or, like, is he pretty much he's going to be back next year?
I think he's
back. I have zero clue.
I think he's back. Yeah, especially with NIL, where it's like, if you could go maybe try to bust around in the G League, I think he's back pretty solidly. All right, so let's go to, and we'll have more draft talk as the season winds down as well, but let's go to the last game we're going to recap this week. We have Kentucky beating Mississippi State 95-90. Now, Greg picked Kentucky in this one. He got Kentucky perfectly picks this week for good and for bad. This was the flip of what we had talked about with Kentucky, where honestly, maybe this is where I go wrong. I analyzed this matchup and said, you know what, Mississippi State, Chris Jans, they can play some defense, but they have some guards who could score. Kentucky stops score. You know, they can't always stop those scoring guards. No, this is about Kentucky shooting 50% from three. That's what the game is. 16 or 32. You're not going to lose many games doing that. So again, as much as, like, you want to sit here and analyze, oh well, Mississippi State played well. They gave them a run for their money. Like, they probably win this game if Kentucky doesn't shoot that well, and that's what it came down to. Jackson Robinson needed a big game in a Kentucky uniform. The last one he had was kind of when he was playing point guard, when all the point guards were hurt. Lamont Butler and Kirk Kriisa both had to miss the Gonzaga game. Kirk Kriisa left at a certain point in the Gonzaga game with his injury, and he played point guard, and he had a big game. But he scored 27 points in this one, 7 of 10 from 3, 9 of 10 from the field. You know, it's going to be, I think, a rewarding but also a frustrating season for Kentucky fans, because it is very much going to come down to that one stat where it is 3 points, what was your percentage in this game. That is how you win, and that's what flipped in this game from last game. They won 95-90. So good win for them. Greg, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'd love to see them win a game a different way. You know, win a muck it up game. You know, we'll see if they get in one of those situations. I think that's what would make me fine. If they won an ugly game, you know, where it was poor shooting, and maybe I could look through their schedule. Maybe you could pick one out and say, well, what about this game? But I think that's what would make me say, like, all right, like I'm ready to talk about this team as national title contender. Yes, they just lost to Georgia this week, but this is life in the SEC. Mississippi State, I mean, you said it, like, it's hard to beat a team when they shoot 50% from three. And, like, you know, I mean, like, some of that is perimeter defense, but, like, sometimes guys, like, we've all been there. Sometimes the guy you're guarding they're just hitting. And, like, that's how it goes, right? I think the Mississippi State team is pretty good. I don't think there's anything to hang your head about from this game, but obviously it's a win they would have liked to. Hey, and it felt at times coming down the stretch like they were gonna. You know, I did put money on a little bit of money on UK on this game, and Joe, the only thing you said was the officials were listed somewhere, and the officials that were listed have a history of anti-Kentucky. And Joe, listen, for anybody that doesn't know, like, Joe is a Kentucky fan, but, like, he is the most objective Kentucky fan out there. He's not crazy. Like, what the things he says are logical. Yes, he is, he loves his team, but, like, I would very much agree with what his analysis of this. That does change the game a little bit. The way the game was officiated, and, that does change the game a little bit, but it did feel like coming down the stretch, it was like, man, are they gonna? Is Mississippi State gonna get over this hump? And, like, but I'm a little murky because we were in Indianapolis and we were at a brewery and I had the game on my phone. I can't remember the sequence of events towards the end, but I just remember thinking, like, once it got to, like, foul time, it was fine, within the last, like, 15 seconds. But before that, I was a little worried for you and for my wallet too.
Yeah, you're right. I think Kentucky fans have posted out there that it was going to be two of the officials that give Kentucky hard times. Kentucky fans are crazy enough; they have a whole database about what your winning percentage is with each official, and that was not going to be a good game for them. But it ended up being different officials, and that changed things considerably, honestly. As we saw the officiating maybe affect things in the other game they played, but hard to blame the officials when you lose by that much to Georgia. But they get the win, and again, it's going to be frustrating. It's going to be one of those where it's going to be hard to predict what they do, right? So I think the easiest analogy here is that Alabama team we just talked about, Greg. Like, we get to March, I could see them winning 4 or 5 games in a row. I mean, 4 games in a row, maybe. I could see them losing the first game if they shoot like they did against Georgia. Like, maybe the second game if you want to be really safe. Like, that's what's going to be frustrating about this team down the stretch, is because the matchups don't matter as much as what they do themselves, which, again, is a good place to be. All you can do is beat yourself, and that's kind of a good place to be in. But a lot to be figured out for this Kentucky team. Greg, let's get to some picks from the week. We have a week that has a very good Tuesday and some good basketball on Saturday as well. We're going to start it off with the Tuesday. And we're going to start it off with Mississippi State and Auburn. So obviously Janiah Broome will not play in this one. Greg, who are you going with?
I am still picking Auburn, but, like, you want to talk about golden opportunity for Mississippi State? Like, yes, it is at Auburn, but Janiah Broome's not playing. I mean, the only thing that's different about this, as opposed to Auburn's last game, is they're going into the game knowing Janiah Broome is not playing. They still have some great bigs. Dylan Cardwell, Channing Johnson. They've got some great. They're not Janiah Broome, but they do have some great interior presence. Those guards are lethal, whether it's Pettiford or Miles Kelly. I mean, those guys can shoot, they can drive. This team is still good, but if there's ever a time to pick off Auburn, it's when Janiah Broome is not playing. I'm still picking Auburn, but don't be surprised if we come back next week and it's this torrential Mississippi State defense put it together for a whole game, and Josh Hubbard had 27 on 7 of 12 shooting or something like that. That would be the story. And I know I've said teams will win games one way or the other certain ways before, but like I don't see another, like if they were to win this game, I don't really see how it would end up like a different way.
Yeah, I would go with Mississippi State if we were at home because it's on the road and because I think Auburn has a lot of good bodies. I think they're going to win this one. Mississippi State, it's one of those things where I think you mentioned it, Greg. I like Mississippi State. I think they could be a team that could be a dangerous NCAA tournament team even, but they are going to take their lumps in SEC play like everyone else is going to as well. As you mentioned, I think if they're going to win this one, it's going to be Josh Hubbard putting up a lot of points. I think Auburn and Bruce Pearl can find a way to slow him down. So I'm going Auburn as well. Greg, you talked about a muck-it-up game with Kentucky. Well, Texas A&M at Kentucky here. Currently, Kentucky's favored by 6.5 points. I think that kind of indicates that they don't think Wade Taylor is going to play because I think it might be a little closer than...
I got actually, according to John Rothstein, tweeted 17 minutes ago, Texas A&M's Wade Taylor is out for Tuesday's game per the SEC injury report. Also worth noting, in the same, just because it's the same tweet, Andrew Carr is listed as probable. So
yeah, he was questionable Saturday. He did play, so that makes a lot of sense. But a team that could still muck it up, win this one. I mean, all the bodies they could throw. Who are you going with, Greg?
I'll still take Kentucky. Games at home, coming off a great shooting performance. I know it's without Wade Taylor, but this is the game that like I'd love to see Kentucky win this game like 65-58. I'd love nothing more. That's the kind of thing that would make me really start believing in this team. If like they can figure out a way to win a game like that, and maybe they'll put up 90 again, and Jackson Robinson will continue to kind of go on that arc that we've seen him coming up in the last couple of weeks. So, but if they were to win an ugly game, that's about all I can ask for. I'm not asking them to play ugly. If you're shooting 47% from three, like please don't stop. But if they win an ugly game, it would really make me start to believe in them.
Yeah, the reason why I think this could be closer than people think, I mean, even with Wade Taylor out, Kentucky has struggled with rebounding the basketball at times this year. Texas A&M has all those bodies they can throw out. Last year, Anderson Garcia was one of the most efficient offensive rebounders in the country. He's coming off the bench for them. They have Henry Coleman. They have Solomon Washington, who averages 6 rebounds a game. They can throw bodies. They can be physical. And that's the one thing, if you're going to kind of look at this Kentucky team, is like maybe they're not the most physical. Maybe they can't be tough inside. So with Andrew Carr kind of banged up, could that kind of create something where even without Wade Taylor, Texas A&M can win? Now, I'm still going Kentucky. I think if you're going to get a win this week out of Kentucky, because they have 2 tough games, we'll pick the other one later. This is the one you're probably going to get because Wade Taylor's out. But there is a very clear path to how Texas A&M can win, and that is using their body, using their fouls, being physical, and running Kentucky off the three-point line. So I'm going Kentucky as well, but definitely could be a game. Let's move on to Wednesday. We have Kansas and Iowa State, one of the games of the Big 12 season to watch here. Greg, this is a really good one. We're going to have some Hilton Magic possibly. Kansas is up to number 9 in the polls. Iowa State's number 2.
Tell me this game is not on. That's one thing I just thought about. Tell me this game is not on ESPN Plus, because I'm going to be so mad if it's on ESPN Plus.
It's on ESPN too.
Thank goodness. All right, I thought we were going to end up with one of those weird Big 12 ends up on ESPN Plus. This is the game I think I'm most excited to watch this week. There's some other matchups that like maybe I would have been more excited for, but extenuating circumstances and injuries and whatnot, make it look a little different. Maybe that Bama-Kentucky game could be really fun, but I am really looking forward to this game. I'm going to take Iowa State. I think this is the pick I struggled most with this week for obvious reason. It's, we're really going to start to get to the nitty gritty of who's going to win the Big 12. And this very well could be one of those 2 or 3 games that decides who your Big 12 season winner is. I'll take Iowa State in this game.
I'm going Iowa State as well. I think this team is much better than the team last year that they had when they had the 2 seed in the tournament and had a lot of potential. The main difference, I think, Curtis Jones has just taken a huge step up, 17.3 points per game. So, when you have Keyshawn Gilbert playing well, when you have him playing well, even with Taman Lipsey maybe not playing his best this season, I think that's still okay. They are a very good team. They can beat you in a bunch of different ways. So I think Iowa State can win this one at home. Kansas, I still like them a lot more than in the past. But Greg, we talked about it. I think it was last week. Their transfers have not been what we thought they were, and they're still winning games, and they deserve credit for that. But they need those guys to step up, and Bill Self needs to figure that out, and he will probably because he's Bill Self.
It's just funny because when we talked about them early in the year, like the first 2 weeks of November, I probably after they beat Duke, we were like, yeah, these transfers are, and like it's kind of tapered off a little bit since then.
Oh yeah, if you look at the box scores, oh boy, AJ Storr is getting some heat right now. So don't go on social media if you're him. Let's go to Georgia and Tennessee. Greg kind of alluded to what your pick might be here, but who are you going with?
I will go with Tennessee. I don't think they lay another stinker, and this game's at home. I considered taking Georgia, but like again, I just like yes they beat Kentucky and yes they beat Oklahoma, but like I had this narrative in my head of why I wanted to pick them last week, and it turned out to be right. But like I still wasn't totally wild. I still think they're a decent team. Don't get me wrong. Like I think Georgia's good, and Aston is definitely worth watching, and they got a couple other pieces on that team, definitely worth watching. The other freshman on that team, the big guy. Oh my goodness, I can't think of his name. He good rim protector, has some really nice finishes and dunks. There's Georgia's worth watching, but I'll take Tennessee in this game. If Georgia wins this game, I might start to think about like, all right, where do I put them in terms of the SEC hierarchy? But I don't think they get this one.
Talk about Salto Sorrell.
Yes, him.
Former Kentucky signee who under John Calipari.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, before he went back to OT and then
he's
Georgia.
Fun.
Yeah,
I'm sure he wasn't fun for you to watch when he was playing against Kentucky last week, but he's fun.
He's a good player. I mean, he is in a perfect role for him. If he had to come to Kentucky, he would either have been thrust into a role he didn't deserve, or he wouldn't have played at all. So it's nice that he's playing 15 minutes a game at Georgia, and that's like a pretty good spot for him to be in, and a fun player for sure. I'm going Tennessee. I don't think Georgia's that good, and I think Tennessee is that good. The only thing that could stop my pick here, and I think get Georgia the win, is if their current issues at Tennessee, which is again like Rick Barnes yelling at Chaz Lanier to like, hey, we're paying you to shoot. You need to shoot, even if you're missing all your shots. There's it's not all peaches. It's not all peaches and roses over there. So I think Tennessee could have some struggles, but that's more with themselves. I do think they get this win. This one's at home with them, so going Tennessee here. On Saturday, we have Kentucky and Alabama. I mentioned this game a little bit earlier. A team that will be playing similar styles, shooting a lot of threes, and they might break the scoreboard, or if they have an off night, it might look really ugly.
That was the first question I was going to ask you was, what do you think the over? It won't be out because anytime soon because it's a college basketball game. Those lines don't come out for a while. What do you think the over-under on this game is going to be? Could we see a pregame over-under of 199 in a college basketball game? I mean, like, I don't know which way I'd bet. It's just like it's going to be one of those games. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm taking Bama on the road, but this is probably the second game that I'm most excited for. It's coming up this week.
Yeah, gonna go Alabama in this one, even on the road. The depth is key here, and I do think that they have a lot more experience playing this style than Kentucky does. This will be interesting to watch the crowd. We saw the Kentucky's a lot of storylines this year, right? And coaching Nate Oates turned down Kentucky even before it was offered to him. He turned down Kentucky. We'll see if maybe the crowd gets a little bit lively in this one. The crowd's been a little bit better this year for Kentucky.
Oh, Kentucky fans.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Nah.
So, but I'm going Alabama. I think their team is a little bit further ahead right now. And I think Kentucky's issues on the glass and on the perimeter defense might come back to haunt them in this one. So Alabama for me. Moving on, Greg, we have Auburn and Georgia. I don't have anything to add here. Yeah, Auburn. All right.
And like it's got to be on the pick sheet because it's a ranked team on a ranked team, which inevitably means Georgia will win both games this week, and we will come back next week talking about 7th ranked Georgia or something like that. But my logical mind tells me Auburn next game.
Yeah, Auburn for me as well. Let's go Purdue and Oregon. So Oregon surprised me, Greg. They were a 2 seed on my bracketology. Maybe they'll see it in the ranking because they're 13th in the country. But they are having a very, very good season this year. If you look at the resume, I think that's 7 quad 1 wins. I could be wrong about that. Maybe I'm thinking about someone else. But they're playing Purdue. Purdue going on the West Coast for this one. 17 versus 13 matchup here on NBC.
I will take this. I guess will be my surprise result of the week. I'll take Purdue to go on the road, West Coast, and beat Oregon.
All right, that's it. All right, got it. I'm gonna go.
Hey, listen. I feel like I'm going through and I'm picking all these favorite and it's like I gotta shoot a shot somewhere because it's college basketball and weird things happen and like. I don't think depending on Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn is like my worst idea. You know what I mean? Even if it is 1,500 miles from home, like I don't think that's the worst idea in the world.
I don't think it's the worst idea either. I just thought you might have one singular reason you wanted to say.
Next game.
Yeah, okay. So with Georgia Auburn, it makes sense with some of the teams that are thought to be pretty similar in talent level, at least this year. Maybe not. But all right, I'm going to Oregon. They are one of 2 teams who does have 7 quad 1 wins so far. They do have a quad 2 loss already this season. But I think Dana Altman is getting this team to come along pretty nicely. They're kind of, I think, still having to go through the grind of the Big Ten schedule where I think they might lose some games when they have to go on some of these big road trips. They have avoided that so far. I think they've played on the road at Ohio State and Penn State last week, but they haven't gone on too many road trips yet, so we'll see how that affects them when they have more and more coming up. But at home in this one, they have Jackson Selsted's a very good player. I think they can handle these Purdue guards. All right, let's go to Ole Miss, Mississippi State, rivalry game here. Greg, this is 2 ranked teams. I don't know when the last time these 2 teams were ranked playing each other. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, we need the Game House research assistant. That would probably be me, right?
Yeah,
we need that research. Yeah, I mean, like it's on there because, and don't get me wrong, like Ole Miss is good, I still think Mississippi State's gonna be too much for them. It's nice to see what Chris Beard has done for the Ole Miss program, despite his off the court stuff. Gotta at least mention it. But do you think this is? I mean, I don't think I have much to add about the game itself. I think Mississippi State's gonna win and they're gonna handle it. It's at home. It's a rivalry game. Which also means anything can happen, but I'm not too worried from Mississippi State side. Do you think, because Chris Beard, obviously has a history of not talking about Texas, that was something completely different, but like jumping and jumping and jumping from job to job to job, do you think he might land somewhere else, or do you think because of his extracurricular circumstances, like he's probably going to be sticking with Ole Miss for quite some time? Because Ole Miss is, if Ole Miss ends up in the top half of the SEC, like that's gonna be something to hang your hat on. And this is his 2nd year at Ole Miss now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just what I don't know is if like that's good enough to get him another job and like maybe land him back on more of a national landscape of basketball. When you think that, you don't really think Ole Miss doesn't come to mind first. They're having a good year. It's fine, but I don't know. Maybe nothing happens. I just don't know if you have thoughts.
Yeah, I think he's probably stuck there for a couple more years. I don't know if "stuck's" the right word, but I think he's probably there for a couple more years.
I think that's a good way to describe it. Because if that would be because I think they're doing well, but like I think that would be the thing that would hold him back is being stuck there.
Right, but the other thing, too, is, I don't think he's totally reliant on his success being that you have to be at one of those big programs. Like, he did it at Texas Tech, and I will say Texas Tech has a very good fan environment. We saw that in the Iowa State game this week. But they don't have all the resources of some of the other programs that were competing for national titles around that time. So I don't think it's totally reliant on that. I do think he can have success at Ole Miss, and I think he's probably going to be there for a couple more years, and then we'll see. I guess if nothing else comes up off the court, maybe he gets another chance in a couple of years. But I think for the time being, he's there. For my pick for this game, I'm going Mississippi State as well. I mentioned how many times I love Josh Hubbard. I also like Cameron Matthews for Mississippi State. I think they're a pretty good combination. And I think Ole Miss is a little bit underrated right now. I had them at a 5 seed in bracketology, which I guess kind of they're 21st team in the country, but I still think people don't see them as that. They have, I think, a couple wins that are like turning out to be better than we thought. Like they beat Louisville on the road. That's turning out to look a little bit better now that Louisville's kind of on a hot streak. So watch out for Ole Miss too. I think they lose this one on the road. All right, Greg, any final thoughts for the week? All right, we have one more pick. We have one more. Illinois, Michigan State on Sunday.
Illinois, we hope Gutierrez is going to come back and be healthy. That's the only thing I said, and I texted Joe this. I'm picking Indiana to beat Illinois early in the week. Really, probably only because I don't think it sounds like KJ might not play. I think Indiana is going to be in that bubble conversation. They put a lot of money into that roster. I still think Mike Woodson's probably on his way out, but they might just get lucky enough to play Illinois at the right time and happen to get that win. We'll see about that. Obviously, if KJ ends up playing, I'd be picking Illinois, but we have to make I self-impose that I have to make my picks on Monday. So, Joe, you've said before that if I want to change something in the middle of the week, I can, but I'm a man of integrity. So once I make my pick on Monday, it stays like that, right?
Oh, you could change. You could do whatever. I think you have to stick with your picks for the purposes of the show. But if you want to bet outside of what you're picking, I don't think there's a problem with that. If you learn new information, it's only smart to take the new information you get and do it. But for terms of us counting it for the show, yes, you have to keep it as this. All right, so yeah, you have Indiana. I will say is very important. You're right; they're right on the bubble, right on the edge line there of getting in the tournament. Not so very important for them to get that win if they do get it. For this game specifically, I have Illinois winning as well. Big fan of Kasparis. I think they have a lot of talent all around too. If he can't play, that gives him a shot. But this is basically picking them, thinking, hey, if they said he was warming up with the team and they said they're going to wait till he's 100%, I would imagine that he's close to 100% if he's warming up with the team like he was this past week. So going to Illinois in that one. All right, Greg, any final thoughts for the week?
Indianapolis this weekend was fun. Got to see Hinkle. It was beautiful. Ryan Kalkbrenner looks bigger in person. I didn't think that was possible, but it is. Mm-hmm. He's huge. Butler was a good environment. I mean, the stadium is very open. There's really not anywhere you can sit. And Joe, I know you've been there before, but like, there's really not anywhere you could sit, and it would be like a bad view. Sometimes I do think, like, especially when, just again from personal experience, when we're at UD Arena and when we were up in the 400s, though, it splits out wide and the ceiling's low, so it makes you feel like you can't see the game as well. And that is just it was a fun time. Went through the sleet and the snow to get there, and it was definitely worth it. So my only other thing, Joe, just so we don't have to talk about it, next week, Rutgers just beat UCLA. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on that? That's, even at home, that's a bit surprising. I mean, like, man, the UCLA tumble continues.
I'm gonna say it doesn't surprise me at all. I think UCLA is just not that good, and I think traveling all the way across the country is kind of funny, but Rutgers has potential. They're not, whether they're 9-8 right now, I guess, after that win, so they have potential. We knew they had potential, and coming together is going to be huge. But I would say this is a solid win for them in terms of building momentum, but like, I'm not shocked. I don't know if you are, but it's a good win.
I like saw the line on that game, and I like thought about putting some money on it, but then I was like, I really can't decide which way I would go with that game. Because Rutgers was I think they were plus 2.5 or something, and I thought about putting money there, and I was like, honestly, I just can't tell what I think of that. So I don't know that I'm surprised, but like, in terms of the narrative of what's going on with UCLA right now, like, yikes. So maybe we will see a Mick departure this offseason.
Yeah, we might. My final thought, Greg, we have a game that we did not pick, but is very much on our radar on this show. Santa Clara and Gonzaga on Saturday night. I originally would not pick Santa Clara in this game on the road, but when I took into account that Santa Clara is hot and Gonzaga has had their issues this season, and I think they're still sorting those issues out as we've talked about them a lot over the course of the non-conference schedule. They have won, I think, 5 straight games, but maybe not the competition that they're used to like playing. I took Santa Clara. They're hot. 9 out of their last 10. They have the dogs to match up with Gonzaga in certain areas. They're not a better team. But that is one to watch. This is a team that we pointed out at the beginning of the season, so I figured I'd mention that. That'll be a fun game to watch late Saturday night.
I actually did consider putting that on our pick sheet, but I just didn't think it rose to like the level of
not yet.
But again, I think it's a game I'll be interested in watching. I know it's another loaded Saturday, but that'll be in its own time window. So
I'll be at a bachelor party watching it on my phone, which will be fun, and trying to describe to everyone, hey, let's gamble on Santa Clara. That'll be fun. But that is important for them because they took some early season losses that I think they are going to hurt them. Like they lost North Dakota State, they lost to Nevada. Maybe not the worst loss, but they need to start putting some wins together. They've started that. A win here would really help their tournament case. They're probably not really on the bubble yet, but they're getting there. So this will really be a big thing for them. All right, so my turn to remind everyone to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, whether that's Spotify, Apple, and give us a review if you can. That really helps us out. And then also to like and subscribe on the TGH YouTube channel. We'll be coming back every week with college basketball talk. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.